off Patrick Christie's tonight. Live studio audience. I love these shows. It's really kind of makes it zip along nicely. And I'm joined now by the Conservative leadership candidate, Robert Jenrick. Robert, good evening. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for agreeing to come on tonight. And we're going to be taking some questions from the audience shortly. But before that, look, it was the budget today. So what would you have said if you were Rishi Sunak in his position today? You thought he was on quite good form, actually.
Yeah, firstly, I thought Rishi did a good job. He socked it to Rachel Reeves. Look, this is the biggest tax hike in modern political history. You've got to go back to the early 1990s. And this is a government that just 3 months ago stood on a platform of not raising taxes for working people. They lied then. They just massively increased taxes, £40 billion of tax rises. And the worst thing of all, they're downgrading growth, aren't they? So all of these taxes are going to rise, all that harm to the economy, and there is no prospect that our country is going to get its economy going again, which is what we all want to see.
No, indeed. I mean, it was a tricky budget, really. I'm going to just walk out straight over, I think, to there's a gentleman here on the front row with a microphone in his hand. It's at this point that I sometimes wish that maybe I'd vetted the questions, but here we go. Go on. What would you like to say?
Well, I'll give you a heads up. I left the Tory party, joined Reform. I stood for them in the London Assembly and the last general election. Reform Party is very unified. It's on message. The term used to describe the Tory party is quite often a broad church. And to me, what that really means is we're a split, divided party. And it doesn't really matter to me, the way I look at it, whatever the potential next leader says, the rhetoric, because the majority of the parliamentary party are Liberal.
OK, so, go on then. I suppose that's, in that is a question about how you're going to unify the party.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I use the term broad church, but I also say we need a common creed, because a political party has to have a bit of a sense of religion, doesn't it? It's got to stand for something. It's got to be very clear about what its principles and values are. And that's what I want to instil in the Conservative Party again. I want you to feel, in time, that my party is your natural home. In fact, that it's the natural home for all small C Conservatives. And certainly on immigration, which is one, not the only, but one of the big issues that alienated so many people and pushed them towards reform, I have very clear positions. I want to set a cap in Parliament in the tens of thousands, make it the law of the land, so you can have confidence that we will do it this time. And on illegal migration, implement the policy that ultimately led me to resign from the Cabinet at the end of last year, which is if you come here illegally on a small boat, you get detained, you get removed within hours and days, not weeks and months and years, as is the case today. And to do that, we'll leave the European Convention on Human Rights. I hope if we have those clear positions and a leader with credibility on these issues, you in time, and I appreciate you feel angry and frustrated at what we did or didn't do in office, but in time you'll come back to us.
OK. Can I just ask, before we go to the next question, on a couple of points there, just a show of hands, does anyone think it would be a good thing to have in law a cap on the number of people? So hands up if you think that's a good thing. Yeah, that's pretty relatively, you know, it's good. So not particularly here at the front row, but yeah, that's quite. What about leaving the ECHR? Where are people on that? Your hands straight up. He wanted to leave years ago. OK, all right. OK, well, Ms. Baggy, no, I mean more wanting to leave than not. I think you've got a microphone, sir, have you? Go on then.
Hello, Mr. Jenrick. My name's Nick.
Hi, Nick.
After 14 years in power, seeing the amount of people that have left and gone to reform. What do you think you're going to do different now? Because it seems to be clear that the amount of people that have gone to reform want something new, because what we're seeing between the battery of Labour and Conservatives, how are you going to make, like, the Conservatives 2.0 and get these people back? Because for 14 years, much of the rhetoric that you talk about now, nothing's been done about it.
Yeah.
OK. Well,
yeah, well, Nick, you speak for millions of people, frankly. We lost 4 million voters to reform at the last election. And I think that those people, perhaps like you, are deeply sceptical of my party and that it is going to take a lot to persuade you to come back. That's why I say we're going to have to change the party fundamentally, and this time actually deliver. Because we didn't deliver on some of those big questions. We've spoken about legal and illegal migration, but there are other issues as well. I hope that if I have very clear policies, not just a promise of one tomorrow, but specific policies, substance now, that you will begin to have faith in me as the leader of this party and in the Conservative Party once again. But I don't underestimate how hard it's going to be, because, frankly, I share your anger and frustration. You know, I ultimately resigned from the Cabinet because I felt that on some of the big issues, the Conservative Party let you down. And that is why perhaps you, but certainly many others, chose to go to reform.
OK, just on that, there is a difference in your campaign and Kemi Badenoch's campaign, or certainly the rhetoric, I think. I mean, I obviously watched the well, it wasn't head-to-head, was it? But, you know, the back-to-back. You go straight out the traps, policy. You know, you've kind of written your manifesto, really, I think. Kemi's not. Is it quite... I mean, do you think it would be dangerous to vote for Kemi? Do people know what she really stands for, or would you not go that far?
Well, look, I think that a plan now is always more valuable than a vague promise of one tomorrow. And I think that just listening to Nick's question and the gentleman here, sorry, I don't know your... Alan. People are very sceptical about the Conservative Party right now, particularly on some of these issues like immigration, where we failed. You didn't do enough when we were in office. And I think just saying that we will think this through, we'll come forward with policies in the months or years to come, isn't going to cut it. If my colleagues are on the doorstep trying to persuade people like the audience tonight, next year, in the May local elections, perhaps when there are Reform candidates standing against Conservatives, we need to have very clear, crystal clear positions. And that's what I offer. Kemi doesn't think that. She thinks that we should spend more time mulling this over. I think that's a mistake.
OK. Gentleman here.
I'm Angus. I am a Conservative member in Essex, and I have voted. If you lose on Saturday, will you serve in the shadow cabinet?
Oh, Zinger from Angus there.
Yeah, I don't expect to lose, or certainly don't hope to lose. But yes, absolutely. I mean, my view, and I would be the first to say to Kemi, please come and join my shadow cabinet in a senior position, because I think we want to get the best players on the pitch. The Conservative Party is in a hole. We need to unite the Conservative Party's family and ensure that all of the best people are contributing to our revival.
OK, all right, go on then, sir.
My name's Nick as well. There are lots of us here. Bearing in mind that the last time you had you swept to power, you had a very charismatic leader, and your plummet happened when you lost that charismatic leader. So would there be a place for him in a future government or in a future cabinet?
Yeah, no, I've said when I've been asked this question repeatedly that I want to get all the best people in the Conservative family back together. And Boris is obviously one of those. He's chosen to leave Parliament, and I don't know whether he wants to come back to Parliament. He's busy with his book and having a nice life. But if he wanted to, then, you know, I'd be happy. And more broadly, I don't think that the leader of the day should be dictating who or isn't a Conservative MP. I think that should be at the hands of the membership. And so if members want to choose him or think of other good people that there are who are not currently in Parliament, like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Penny Mordaunt, of different persuasions within the Conservative family, then they should be able to select them, get back into Parliament, get back to contributing to our party.
OK, one of the things, just kind of dragging it back loosely, budget-related, is the amount of tax that we're all paying. Huge amounts of tax. We spoke a bit in the last hour about the social contract and whether or not that's kind of been broken a bit now. I mean, Labour appeared to be absolutely hammering farmers as well today with the old kind of inheritance tax thing. I mean, is that something that you would look to reverse, do you think?
I think we probably would do. I mean, I'll have to give it thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a very sad policy, because you've got family farms that have been passed down through the generations. Farmers always thought that they'd be able to hand them to their kids or their grandkids, and now suddenly they're going to be scrabbling around trying to get legal and tax advice and work out how this can work, because they're going to end up having to pay very significant amounts of inheritance tax. And unless this is resolved, you're going to see the end of family farms. And it's ultimately family farms that are a mainstay of our rural life and the maintenance and protection of the countryside.
Indeed. Now, when I interviewed Kemi Badenoch last week, I was trying to get from her how she thought she could just deport people without leaving the ECHR. And I did put a couple of examples. There was an individual who battered a man to death in the back of an ambulance. We can't get rid of him, I think, because on It would affect his mental health if we sent him back to, I think it was
Uganda.
There you go. So Kemi's attitude, as far as I could tell, was that she would do her best to try to change the mind of some of the foreign judges and also some of the judges here, and then hope that we maybe interpreted the law a bit better, which is a view, isn't it? But you are absolutely adamant that we have to leave the ECHR. So why is she wrong, then?
Look, I think reform is a fantasy. I understand why one might want to reach for it as a comfort blanket, but I have travelled around Europe, I've spoken to all the interior ministers and immigration ministers. There is no process by which you can reform the ECHR. It requires the unanimous approval of 46 member states, from Iceland, Andorra to Turkey. Never going to happen. It is as doomed to fail as David Cameron's attempt to renegotiate our membership of the EU. If we are lucky enough to get back into power, say in 4 or 5 years' time, the public are not going to give us a third chance. The public don't want to mess around. They want to secure our borders. They want to end the farce of the small boats. They want to get terrorists and foreign paedophiles and murderers and rapists off our streets, out of our country. By leaving the ECHR, you can do that. It's not the only thing you'd have to do. I've said we should repeal the Human Rights Act that Tony Blair created as well. And yes, activist judges exist in our own country, as well as in Strasbourg. So there's many things you'd have to do. But the essential foundation is leaving the ECHR. Otherwise, we will never fix these problems, and we'll consign the country to years, decades more of this farce.
OK, all right. Right, I'm keen to see if we can squeeze another question from someone here. Straight up, there we are. Let's get the microphone if we possibly can. And tell you what, I'll do it. There you go. There we are. All right. Oh, he's got one. Lovely stuff. All right, so what are you going to ask him?
Good evening, Mr. Jenrick.
Good evening.
It's just a question or a comment about the social housing and the summaries of the budget today. This is what I read. Social housing providers to be allowed to increase rents above inflation under multi-year settlement external. My point is, surely that will drive affordable social housing even further away.
OK, so say that last bit again for me.
Surely this announcement today about increasing the rents above multi-year settlement will drive people away from getting on the social housing because they won't be able to afford the rents.
Yeah, what are we going to do? I mean, there is a housing crisis. There's a concern with the Labour Party about when they're talking about building new homes. There's quite a concern about who's going to live in some of those homes, it must be said. What would you do in relation to that gentleman's point there, do you think, really? I mean, in terms of social housing, in terms of sort of housing crisis, you're former housing minister, were you?
I was. Yeah, no, I understand the point you're making. In fact, most of our affordable housing in this country is only priced at 80% of market rent, so it's not a big discount. And so if you start allowing the housing associations to jack up the rent, it's going to make it life difficult for people on low incomes. The bigger issue is we've got to be building more homes. I want us to fix the housing crisis, help young people onto the housing ladder. I think you do that primarily by densifying and regenerating our big cities. Places like inner East London, places like the cities that I know. I grew up in Wolverhampton in the Midlands. So places like that, Birmingham, Derby, Leicester, Nottingham, that are crying out for regeneration, aspirational families to be living in them. I think that is a great Conservative mission, one that we should take forwards. OK, all right. So voting... It sounds like X Factor, this, doesn't it? But voting closes, when is it, 5 p.m. tomorrow? 5 o'clock Thursday.
Oh, gosh, OK, all right. How are you feeling?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it is neck and neck. My instinct is this is the closest leadership election we've known for many years. So if there are viewers who have not yet voted, I would get on and vote. Don't put it in the post, obviously. Do it online.
Yeah, OK, all right, well, good luck.